Hey, this is Math Minutes Pro with Dr. Harrison. Today we're going to talk about slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. And in fact, we're going to show you how to identify which lines are parallel or which lines are perpendicular when you are given a set of linear equations. Now remember, parallel lines are lines in a plane that do not intersect, okay? And perpendicular lines are, you can have two lines that intersect, right, in a plane, forming a right angle, all right? So first of all, let's start with some basic information, and I want to start with what we need to know in order to tell when lines are parallel based on the slopes. So what we want to say is that let's see here. I think what we want to say is lines are parallel, and I'm going to use a symbol for parallel. Lines are parallel if, right, their slopes are equal. Use a little symbolism, okay? So we say two lines are parallel if their slopes are equal. All right? And we'll say for perpendicular, we'll say lines are, and I'll use a symbol for perpendicular. That is a symbol for perpendicular. Lines are perpendicular if, right, the product of the slopes, and I think I want to say two slopes, if the product of, let me be a little more particular. I'm going to say two lines are perpendicular if the product of their slopes equals -1. Okay? Two lines are perpendicular if the product of their slopes equals -1. And I think I'll just say here, make that two lines. Let's be a little consistent here with our color. We'll say two lines are parallel if their slopes are equal, because we're going to be dealing with comparing two lines for now. All right, so let's first start with parallel lines. So let's say we're given three equations, and the first one we have y equals 3 times x plus 4. That's 1. And then we have y equals 4. That's the second equation. And then we have y equals 3 times x. I think I'm going to add one more in there, and then y equals 3. Okay, so we're looking for the slopes, all right, of these three equations to see if the slopes are indeed equal. All right, so let's see what we got here. I am going to draw a line down here so we can do our work at the bottom, okay? Now, I see here for these two equations, remember, they're written in slope-intercept form, and slope-intercept form is y equals m times x plus b, where the slope is m, the coefficient in front of x. Well, let's look. This coefficient is 3, and this coefficient is 3. All right? So we can say that the two lines, if we graph them, they would be parallel for these two equations. So let's see. We got y equals 3 times x plus 4, and y equals 3 times x. And we're going to say that these two, let's see, we're going to say that these two are parallel. All right? I'll just use this symbol. All right. Okay, let's see. What else? Well, if we were to graph this equation, y equals 4, that would be a horizontal line intersecting the y-axis at 4. And if we graph this here, this equation of this line, we would have a horizontal line intersecting the y-axis at 3. Now, we don't see the slope here because the slope is 0. So, in this case, we're going to say that these two particular lines are parallel, they're horizontal. Okay? So in that regard, we're going to go ahead and write that out, that y equals 4, which is a horizontal line, intersecting the y-axis at 4, and y equals 3, which is a horizontal line, intersecting the y-axis at 3, they both are parallel as well. Okay, so there we have it. We were able to identify two linear equations that were parallel. How? In this case, we were able to easily identify the slope. But sometimes you have to think about it conceptually and see yourself graphing it, or you could graph these two equations and notice that they're both horizontal, intersecting the y-axis. So remember, two lines are parallel if their slopes are equal. And here we have the slopes that are equal, right? Slope, which is 3, and 3 here. All right, so now what I want to do is take a look at how we can identify slopes, two lines that are parallel by examining that are perpendicular. We want to examine two lines that are perpendicular by examining their slopes. So let's review what we have here. Two lines are perpendicular if the product of their slopes equals -1. What that means is we'd have to multiply the two slopes of two linear equations and see if we get -1. If we get -1, then that means that their lines, if we graph them, they would be perpendicular to each other. All right, so let's say we're given a set of equations. And let's say we have y equals 5. Okay. And I think I'll do this. We have y equals 1/8 times x. Y equals 1/8 times x. Okay. We have x equals 2. And then we have one more. Y equals 8 times x. minus 5. Now remember, we're inspecting the slopes of lines. We're looking to see if we can find equations to where their product equals -1, or if we graph them, they are perpendicular. All right, so let's see. I see that this slope is 8 and this slope is 1 over 8. If I multiply 8 times 1 over 8, I get 8 over 8, which is 1. But we need to have -1, so don't fall for that, okay? Well, we also have a case where y equals 5 and x equals 2. So I'm going to draw a coordinate plane. Well, this is the y-axis and that's the x-axis. And let's graph y equals 5. Let's see. So if I say that this is 5, then if I graph that, that is y equals 5. Okay? And now let's graph x equals 2. So if I say that this is 1 and this is 2, and then I have a graph that intersects the x-axis at 2, x equals 2, then what do we have here? There you go, perpendicular lines. So what does that mean? What that means is that we have our final answer, right? And we can write it right down here in the corner and say y equals 5 and x equals 2 are what? Perpendicular. Okay? We identified two lines that are perpendicular. All right? Now, in this case, the slopes are 0, okay? So this applies when you have a slope, but when you don't have a slope in the equation, you have to graph it. All right? When it says x equals something or y equals something. Okay. I want to do one more and show you how you can identify the slope where their products are -1 to prove that the lines are perpendicular. Okay? So let me clean this up a little bit. All right. So let's say we have y equals 2 or -2. Then we have y equals -1/2. Times x minus 4. And then we have y equals, well, let me fix that. We'll give a point slope. Y minus 4 equals 2 times the quantity of x plus 3. And then we have one more equation, y equals -2 times x. Okay, so we got 4 equations. So now let's inspect these equations and see if anything pops up. Okay? Now, I see we have a -2 here as a slope. And I see I have a +2. If I distribute that, that would be 2 times x. 2 times -2 is 4, so that's not going to work. I need them to be, their products to equal -1. Keep on looking. Well, What about these two here? That's negative. That slope is -2, and that slope is -1/2. A negative times a negative is a positive. So if I multiply these two slopes, I'm going to get 2/2, which is 1, and I need a -1, so that cannot work either. Keep looking. All right, what about this equation and this equation? Okay, well, we could simplify that. We see we have a slope of -1/2. So if I simplify that, that's going to give me y minus 4 equals, distribute 2 times x, which is 2 times x, plus, and then 2 times 3, which is 6. All right, so I see this slope right here is 2, and this slope here is -1/2. All right, so then if I multiply them, 2 times -1/2, I'm multiplying the slopes, right? Here and here, and put that over 1. That becomes 2 times -1 over 1 times 2, which equals -2, right? And 2 times -1 is -2, 1 times 2 is 2, and that gives me -2/2, which is -1. There it is. So what does that mean? What that means is that these two equations here are perpendicular because the product of their slopes equals -1. This is the math to prove that the product of their two slopes equals -1. So our final answer is y minus 4 equals 2 times the quantity of x plus 3, and y equals -1/2 times x minus 4, or what? You got it. They're perpendicular. And sometimes you can do that, and some people will just say, go ahead and put that square there to communicate that the two lines are perpendicular. So there you have it. So thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out my Patreon page on my video description below. On my Patreon page, you can get access to exclusive math lessons, study tips, live Q&A, and more. See you next time.